I'm Tabitha Rock.
And I'm Sam Davenport.
Born and bred in Melbourne, we live and breathe property, and we know the Melbourne market like the back of our hand. We've both been buying and selling real estate in Metro Melbourne for over 2 decades combined, and we've learned a few lessons along the way. We're back, and we've got a very special guest with us today, Jason Chu from Vista Financial.
Woo!
Thank you for having me.
We're excited because you're going to make us more money and save us tax, and that's what this conversation's all about, isn't it?
Well, yeah, if that's what's important to you.
Yeah. Or are you going to tell us to budget and not have smashed avo and not get our cups of coffee?
I think coffee's important. I think coffee's important. Let's not annoy anybody with that at this stage. But yeah, we can talk about anything you want to, share insights as to what my experience and
we want the tips
experience.
and the tricks, and we actually just want to know first and foremost, like, what does a financial planner do? So obviously I've just mentioned a few aspects: budgeting, tax saving. Is that, do you talk about property? Do you talk about shares? Who typically comes to you?
Yeah, good question. So financial advisors have a role of trying to help people live. I think the number one thing I say to people is my job is to help people live an amazing life. And that...
Love that.
Love
that is
that.
a tagline if I've ever heard
Vista
one.
Financial, letting people... What did you just say?
Yeah,
so good I can't remember it.
I generally believe that. I generally believe the role I have is helping people live great lives. And the first thing in understanding how people want to live is to ask them, right? Like, what's a great life to you, Sam? What's a great life to you, Tabitha? It could be different to what a great life to me is, right? And then if you have a level of clarity on what that looks like, I think it's really hard to ask people to know exactly what their whole world is going to look like. Like design this amazing life where in January 2025 you're doing this, and in December 2025 you're doing that. That's all a bit too restrictive.
Where are you going to be in 20 years?
Yeah. But there are generally, I'd say, 4 key things that people are interested in doing better. Number 1 is home. Like, most people, biggest thing in and maybe the hardest thing to achieve is where am I going to live? Where am I going to bring up my family? What are the opportunities within those areas? Like, I think I'd be interested to hear your view on this, but I think that most people live within about 3 kilometres of where their house is. Like, that's the radius of their world.
Yeah.
You guys might be a little bit different, driving all over the place.
Yeah.
But for most of us, if you live in, South Yarra, then you spend a lot of time within about 3 k's of South Yarra.
Yeah.
So number 1 thing is home. Where is my house going to be? Close to family, close to good schools.
Does that include, like, where I'm going to retire to? Like, are you having conversations with people of our age about that sort of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But a lot of people, it's too big of a question. So it's about creating opportunity. Yeah. So you don't have to know. Like, if I asked you, Sam, where are you going to retire? You might have
Greece or something. You've probably got a plan.
Oh, just country Victoria, babe.
Yeah. I think Tabitha can sort you out, don't you?
Yeah. You can buy it for all you're out there.
Yeah. But as long as you're in a position financially so that you have those choices. So often I talk to people about, what were you doing in retirement? How are you going to spend your time? And really, it's a lot of people think they want to travel, which why wouldn't you? Great. Sounds like gratitude, right? But it comes back to saying, hey, I just want to be able to, and this is what people tell me, I just want to have choice in how I spend my time. So I want to be able to choose whether I am going to work or spending time with my loved ones or my friends or whatever it might be. So that's the version of retirement we're trying to help people find. Get to a position in life where you can choose whether you need to work or not work. And people financially are comfortable and don't need to work and continue to work because they just enjoy community and accomplishment and things of that nature. So home's really, really important. Retirement's really, really important, but often it's too far away.
Yeah.
So it's about the decisions you make now.
Yeah.
So I said earlier there's 4 things. So the other thing outside of home is typically around experiences and opportunities. So whether it's traveling or education or the career you're after. So you might have to do an MBA to get into the career you want to do, or you might need to retrain or things like that. And those things cost money and there's trade-offs, right? Like if you went, I'll put it back on you, Sam, because I'm looking across from you. But if I said, hey.
Are you going to do your MBA?
Change career.
Yeah.
Don't do that. No.
Yeah.
Career. You would have to trade off what you're doing today, which means you'd have to take a backward step financially. Maybe you'd earn less money. Maybe you'd spend less time working, more time studying. So opportunities and experiences are a big thing, depending on the stage of life. Often it's to do with, what you're doing with your children. Now, not everybody has kids. Some people are 60 years old and their children are obviously
self-sufficient.
Yeah. And other people who are like me, who've got young children and where they go to school and how they're brought up is, wildly important. So you make a lot of decisions around that.
It's interesting because you're talking about so many of the factors that come into play in life when you're in your younger years. But I think so many people just assume that financial planners and financial advice, specialised financial advice, is only for those who are coming into retirement or who are at that later stage of life. But where would you say is sort of the ideal catchment time for someone to come and sit with a financial planner and start having those conversations?
Is it less about age and more around financial position, like once you receive an inheritance or once you own a home or once you have a kid, like they often say, like, get a will when you've had a kid or like get a will when you buy a property.
Which is a good idea to have a will for sure. So like at Vista Financial, we have advisors across all stages of life, and I think that's an important thing that we try to make sure we've got available to people. So like a 10-year-old person is probably not needing financial planning advice, realistically.
I don't know. There's a couple of like multi-millionaires sitting on YouTube, aren't there, that are 18?
Probably. But in the norm, right? So people who are like the first home buyer, sort of, that's not to do with your age, it's to do with your stage of life.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to see an advisor because you've got big decisions you're making, big financial commitments you're probably taking on, such as a home loan and stuff like that. So that's kind of like the earliest stage, I think makes a lot of sense. Unquestionably, when it comes to investing, time, so the earlier you do it, the quicker you do it, is the best sort of lever you've got to pull. The longer you're invested for, the more you will make. So the earlier you start, the better. Then the more traditional financial planning is people in their late 30s, early 40s with young children. They've got good careers. Their salaries are up to a position, comparative to when they're 28, that if sort of early 40s incomes are much stronger, significantly more financial commitments, much bigger impact with inflation and the world we're in. So, people who are renting, living at home, renting is expensive for sure, but but, if you're a young family, you've got education costs, you've got insurance costs, you've got home loan rates going up. The world's pretty expensive at the moment, right? And then, Sam, the obvious one where all financial planners work and where you're saying earlier is people who are approaching retirement. And the reason behind that is, A, they've had a long time to grow their wealth. So it's now about managing wealth so you don't sort of stuff it up.
Yeah.
Right. But also it's quite scary. My clients tell me this. I'm not going to pretend I've experienced this myself, but my clients tell me this. It's quite scary to think that you're never going to work again and earn any more money. Right. And you're only going to live off what you've created prior to, So managing not just the money side of that, but the emotional side of that is hugely important for where financial advisors help out a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and you may not know this, Jason, but I started a financial planning diploma many years ago because I was going to change the world in terms of young people and getting financial planning advice. But a client that we often find ourselves referring to you is that person that's downsizing, because we do a lot of vendor advocacies in that space, and they're transitioning into retirement and they don't know anything about selling their principal place, putting it into super, the maximum contributions, then getting the maximum pension and like doing this drawdown business, and it's very complicated. And if you seek the right advice, it might cost you 5, 10, 15 grand, not sure your fees, chat to Jason, but you could ultimately save yourself hundreds of thousands if you do it correctly. Would you say the same?
Yeah, I would. So superannuation in general is actually quite complex. And taxes quite complex.
Mm.
And it's why really good accountants are worth their weight in gold, because strategy actually does save you money and put you in a better position. The one thing that a lot of people aren't aware of in superannuation, and why the people who do sell their family home and downsize put money into super, is once you're drawing a regular income out of your superannuation, the super fund's tax-free. On all earnings, on all capital growth, on everything there is. It's all tax-free. So, you know, if you just put context on that, if you've got a couple who have been, you know, working for a long enough time, they're, say, 60 years old, looking at retiring, they sell a house to downsize, and they put, you know, they're eligible in that scenario to put about 600 grand into super, plus all the contributions they've made in the past. They could have $1 million or $2 or $3 million in super. Now, just getting a term deposit within super at sort of 5%, you're getting tax-free income of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Yeah.
That's
Love
a key
that.
takeaway.
Yeah. Just dropping a little
I
nugget
feel
of
like
gold
we're definitely
there.
meant to be slanting this conversation towards real estate and your role with advising. But I love the superannuation takeaway.
Well,
But that is so important
That's-
because
yeah.
it's one of the biggest, one of the number one clients we work with is that downsizer. So they're selling their principal place and they're moving into something else. And 9 times out of 10, we're sitting with them and it's the first sale they've done, a real estate residential sale for the last 30, 40 years.
yeah.
Oftentimes they've got adult children who were brought up in that property and they just don't know where to start in that process and what to do. So people will often talk to us about changeover costs, particularly if they're moving into aged care or anything like that. They know what their changeover cost needs to be. But what if they end up with another sort of, $500 million on top of that? What are they doing with it and how best to sort of work in with that? So that sort of stuff is something that we talk to people about. We don't obviously ever advise them on what to do. We just send them your number. But it's it's something that a lot of people in transacting real estate need to understand.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
I will just touch on the point earlier about starting early and bring the prop culture sort of pathway in as well, which is you can own investment properties within superannuation. And again, if you start early, then, you could do it in your, say, 30s or 40s.
But you have to have, like, what would you say, a minimum of 100,000, 200,000 in super to do that?
Oh, easily, yeah. You'd have to have at least 250 or even more probably. And it needs to make sense.
Who in their early 30s has got 250 in there?
Good question. So I will just share on that. It's typically people coming together to create a self-managed super fund.
Right.
Yeah. So 2 people join this.
Or up to 6.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so the 3 of us, we could create our own superannuation account, go and buy an investment property, and then once we're all age 60, there would be, and a few other tricks and balances, but effectively all age 60, we would be able to sell that investment property capital gains tax free.
I wish I knew this a long time ago because I was 10 years ago trying to recruit about half a dozen of my friends to buy this massive land out near Sunbury and Gisborne. And then I was like, and then we just sit there, but I didn't really know how to work it.
Yeah.
But that's a really good idea.
So through the super fund.
Yeah, but then can you have another super fund?
Yeah.
So you have that self-managed with the bunch of people and then your own.
If you like.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not going to say this many times throughout the conversation, but obviously whatever's right for you, what's important with your goals and all those sorts of things. But if you have similar goals, similar ambitions and the timing makes sense, then bringing people together in having a self-managed super fund, which is in essence just setting up a company within the superannuation rules.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's not right for everybody, but for people who it is right for, then you can buy property through superannuation.
Yeah. And that can only ever be an investment purchase, though.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah,
and there's lots of T's and C's around that. Like you can't make big
improvements.
Yeah, big improvements and renovations.
Yeah, correct. But if you look at the average investor, which this is my assumption, you guys know this better than me, the average property investor probably buys a property, does maintenance along the way, but they don't actually do a lot of proper renovations to it, right?
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Yeah, pretty standard.
Yeah,
and is there any particular zoning that can be bought in the So is it all commercial, industrial, residential?
Yeah, so depends in there's two sides to it. One's the superannuation rules, and from that point of view, you're broadly allowed to invest in most things as long as it's for the benefit of retirement.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So like just to put an example in there to share how this works. Like you could invest in art with your superannuation money as long as that art is an investment and not hanging in your lounge room.
Yeah.
Right, as a general rule, right?
Yeah.
So yes, you can buy anything. Anything's probably a broad word. You can buy most things with superannuation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, if you're going to borrow money to buy a property, then there are rules that the lender will put on you that relate to what you can invest in.
Mm.
So the superannuation rules, important. You can't break them, obviously.
Mm.
But then there's also borrowing rules, and that depends on the lender you're going through.
Yeah.
So that creates another layer of, I'll say complexity, not to say it as a negative thing, but it is a level of complexity.
Yeah. And outside of buying investment properties through superannuation, what is your current advice to your clients at the moment about investing in residential real estate in Victoria? Like what is…
So really openly, we don't advise people whether they should or shouldn't buy any
Right.
properties. We have people come to us and ask about buying property though, obviously. It's, a huge part of Australians' investment choices.
Preferences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. So I think there's a lot of noise around investing in Victoria at the moment, right? It's all negative noise, right? Increased fees.
Preach. Preach.
Yeah. So there are investment philosophies. If you just take property out of it for a minute, like everyone knows Warren Buffett, right? And he's got an investment philosophy, which is effectively do the opposite of what everyone else is doing, right? So when people are fearful, when people are selling out of Victoria, you should buy into Victoria, as an example.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but that is as an example. So at the moment, there's lots of conversations about whether investing in different states is the right approach. But I think it's much more detailed than that. And if you look more like the stock market, you buy companies because that company is either undervalued, which is to say they should be valued at a high price, or you believe there's an opportunity for growth or income. A lot of retirees in Australia use dividends from Australian stocks or income from Australian stocks to support their retirement lifestyle. If you thought about property in the same way, Victoria is not a property, right? South Yarra or Paran, they're not properties, but there are assets or properties within all of these locations. So then it comes down to, well, which property are you investing in?
Yeah.
Right. And that's the biggest difference, I think, that people could learn from how people invest in the share market with property. Each property, I'll ask you guys this question, but would you say that each property is the same return, the same quality?
Yeah.
Doesn't, right? So it's not about whether you should or shouldn't invest in Victoria. It's about buying good assets.
Yeah.
If you buy good assets, it doesn't matter where they are. There are factors to that, but in essence, it's about finding good quality investment opportunities in the stock market. That's companies listed on the ASX, which is typically how superannuation is
And
managed.
if someone comes to you for financial planning advice, would you advise them on, okay, so their preference is to buy residential real estate? Would you help them decide whether to buy that in their personal name, in a trust, in super? Is that part of your advice?
Yeah, it is. So our job is to share scenarios with people. So if someone says, hey, this is my situation, I'd like to buy property for $1 million, could I own that in my superannuation fund? Well, then my job is to say, well, yes, you can, and this is what it looks like, or no, you can't, and these are the reasons why. And then they can compare that with, well, if I bought it in my own name, what does that look like? You mentioned earlier about buying in a trust. So if they buy it in a trust, what does that look like? The probably key thing is with all of these different ownership structures, so personally, self-managed super fund, trust, company as well, which is probably less likely people are buying properties through companies, but it's the tax outcome in the end of the day. So, for example, in your own name, I think most people know this already, but in your own name, if you buy an investment property, you hold it for longer than 12 months, you get 50%
capital gains tax.
Trusts have that as well, but companies don't have that, right? But then earlier we talked about superannuation. Superannuation, you could get there's no 50% thing in super, but you could get to a position of a 0% tax position.
Mm.
So so when we first started today's chat, we talked about understanding what people's long-term goals are. Then if someone says, well, I want to buy that property because eventually I want to retire to Queensland, so I want to buy property in Queensland, that's quite different to saying I want to buy a property for the next 3 to 5 years. I'm going to use that as an investment property, but eventually I actually want to take that money and use it to buy my family home. They're quite different scenarios.
Yeah.
Right? So our role is not to say which property is right for you or even if property is the right investment for you, but it is to say, based on what's important to you, these decisions you're thinking about making, this is how they're going to impact the long-term goal. Or, as you said earlier, they're going to impact how you live your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Where have you seen like property investment go wrong for clients? Have you got any examples of sort of,
Unfortunately, yes, for sure. I'd say the biggest challenge with people when they're buying property is the conflict around how the decision is made.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, like, you guys have a service where you, similar to me, you meet the client, you understand what's important to them, you engage them at a price that's reasonable, and then you deliver on an outcome, right? But the client's paying you to deliver on an outcome. In the property space, there are other scenarios where the client pays nothing, but the outcome's provided, but then there still is people earning money from it, which means there's a conflict on where the decision's made.
Yeah.
So typically what I've seen is people who have, this is probably a bit cliche, but people who have bought in high density apartment buildings and, the price of the property has either gone up or down, often down, not always, but often down. And if you look at that transaction, and this is where the conflict word comes in, like it's often done through a version of an advocate.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a property person that's helping make that acquisition.
Yeah.
We like to call them property spruikers.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, let's go with that. So the spruiker gets paid. Now, if the spruiker's paid by the client, then the spruikers act for the client. But if the spruiker's paid by, in this case, the developer, then they act for the developer. So the conflict is, and that's why I think for you guys, you act for the client and they pay you. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? That's where I've seen property
go wrong.
Yeah, go pretty wrong.
I've actually heard so many times where people have been offered properties from their financial planner to buy, which I'm not sure if you've come across that, but I think that's so unethical because I know that they're getting a clip from getting their client to purchase that property, and I'm not sure that's fully disclosed to their client. It's probably like very much T's and C's down the bottom, but I mean, that's not you, is it, Jason?
No, definitely not. We all financial advisors, and I'm sure other people who work in spaces similar to financial planning,
mortgage brokers,
and many other as well. We definitely get asked to promote property.
Yeah.
Blanket, we would never do that. Like we don't do that. We never do that. Without getting too legal about the whole thing, we're not even allowed to do it.
Yeah. So if your financial planner's offering you properties, run.
If anyone is, if an accountant, any
mortgage
of those
broker,
people.
Yeah, they're not like giving you.
Just ask more questions. Just ask more questions because there's generally, something that going on along the way.
Yeah, I think that whether it's related to that or not, I think if someone's getting paid in the acquisition process, then that's an interesting point about if you're being treated as the person getting the right result.
Yeah.
So
I think that, just disclosure of who's getting kickbacks along the way. Because those people have a vested interest in the outcome. So you should know, who that is. So I mentioned that we often refer and recommend that downsizers get your assistance. But another client that comes across our books a lot that we often recommend they get financial planning advice is that young professional couple, they've often got a little property. They're wondering whether they, upsize and keep that property or upsize and sell that property. And they've maybe got 1 child, 2 children. And we're sort of saying to them, do you have a bit of a plan? Do you know, are you planning another child? What does mat leave look like? There's so many different scenarios here. Have you considered getting financial planning advice? And I think a lot of times they don't think about it because they do think it's really for the sort of over 50 age bracket. I mean, how would you work with clients like that? You sort of...
Yeah, really good question. So I think that as an industry, we probably haven't promoted ourselves well in helping people who aren't retiring or already retired. There are many great firms, definitely Vista. We, have 3 or 4 advisors that work specifically in that space. So
Yeah.
I often say that those people you're referring to there, Tabitha, from what I hear from our clients is that they say things like, well, I earn good money, but I don't know where it all goes.
Yeah.
I feel like we should have the lifestyle we're after, live in the areas we're after, and be able to do the things we want to. For some reason, we just can't. We just feel like, and we look next door and that person's they feel like or look like they're doing better than us, but we're broadly at the same sort of financial position probably. So a couple of things. One is sometimes people don't know what they don't know. So we can share with people about information or strategy. Strategy is probably the key thing of how to get from where you are to where you want to get to. An example of a property strategy, which I'm going to have to caveat myself along the way, say,
Yeah.
talk to your advisor before you do anything. But like an example of a property strategy that I've seen work in the past is that so that example you mentioned earlier, a really common thing is a young couple will buy an apartment somewhere in a city, love it.
Classic.
Start having children. Yeah, total classic, right?
Yeah.
Start having children. Sign me up. I did the same thing, by the way. And then say, well, I need more space. And I'm in whatever area and, I just can't afford the space that I need in that area. So I'm going to look a little bit further out. And then it's like, well, do I sell my apartment and buy a home?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that we do say to people where it's possible and where it makes sense to their financial position is if you can buy the apartment and then before you need the family home and before you need the 3 or 4 bedroom home, if you can buy that as an investment property and keep both properties for a period of time, there's a few benefits doing it. One is that you lock in the purchase price of the family home, right? So as opposed to buying an apartment, staying there for 7 years, then selling that and buying a new house, maybe after year 3, you've bought that other house. And as we've seen in property over the last many, many years, it kind of keeps going up, right? Especially family homes. I feel like they've definitely increased in value a lot in the last little while. So you lock in the purchase price. You get to use tax benefits, negative gearing and different things to help you manage the cost of that investment property, which will eventually be your future house. But then you haven't sold your apartment. So in the assumption that your apartment or your smaller property is going up in value, you're kind of allowing that value to increase. And then ideally, when you sell that property, you'll have a smaller mortgage left on your family home.
Yeah.
All right. So if you put numbers to it really, really quickly, if you were to buy a family home for, I don't know, $1.2 million 3 years ago, it's probably worth, I don't know, $1.6 million today, at a guess. Might not be, right? But at a guess. So all of a sudden you've already triggered or saved yourself $400,000 by not waiting that extra 3 years or so.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Getting into the market sooner and using your existing property to help you do that.
Yeah, correct. As opposed to what most people do is they stay in the property they need. Once they no longer need that property, they sell it and they buy another one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many considerations there.
I know. We could go on about that for a little
Totally
while.
could. Okay, one last question though. What is your preference in terms of the client you would love to work with? Is it that person that's really in their wealth creation phase and like you can really see the impact of financial advice, but it's probably over 10? Or is it the downsizer and the retiree?
It's a hard question. You get a lot of satisfaction out of helping different people at different walks of life.
Yeah.
So the client I really love working with, he's retired and one of the things he tells me is that the money that we are managing for him is so important for him because of the way he wants to pass it on to charities in the future.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's wildly satisfactory. Like you get a lot of satisfaction out of that. Right? On the other side, helping a young family or people who are similar age to myself, which is early 40s, helping them navigate an extremely expensive world
Mm.
to have
Yeah.
a home and, do the holidays and experiences they want and be able to see their kids have the opportunity to flourish in the future is also wildly
Satisfying.
satisfying, correct.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit selfish, which is all about what's satisfying for me.
Yeah.
But they are,
But those are driving factors
Yeah.
in sort of,
What we
pushing you
do.
through the next day and
great.
What we
Agreed.
do.
yeah. No,
we do.
love it.
Oh my
Love
God, I feel like we
it.
could touch on so many different topics. I feel like we're just skimming the surface in so many different areas of what you can cover and what you can do for people. But I'm a big fan of what you do in financial planning. And I mean, the old saying is planning to fail is failing to plan is planning to fail.
Oh my God.
So bloody get a plan together. Call Jason.
Get a financial plan in place.
Yes.
Protect and grow. Protect
No,
and
what
grow.
was the
I can't
what was
remember,
your
but I thought
tagline at
of
the
protect and
start?
grow.
Oh, my role is helping people live amazing lives.
Yes.
What a great way to
Great way to end it up.
But
Thanks, Jason. Go
you
on.
forgot our favourite section,
Oh
girl.
my
You can ask the
God.
questions.
All right,
even
what's
though
happening
you've
now?
forgotten about what we do here at the Proper Garden Podcast.
Yeah. It's been a while between drinks. F, marry, kill. Do you understand the concept of that? So
Yes, you've listened to all our podcasts, Jason, and you know exactly what we're talking about.
So the idea is we're going to give you 3 things, and one of them you've got to marry. So long term, you love it, you're with it forever. And the one you've got to kill off, and the other one you just play around with on the side.
Yeah. It's just for a good time,
Yeah,
not a long
you
time.
like
Okay.
them, but
Yeah.
you're not going to commit to them.
Yeah, how many takes have we got here?
None. One. We want the real,
right.
honest truth.
All right.
So this is in terms
So-
of how you operate in your business and what you do for clients and the things that you're working with them on. So
Yeah.
do you love focusing or working with them on their investment strategies, their insurance policies, or
If he doesn't kill that one, Jason, you're
or
not
their
invited back.
or their retirement planning?
What are the 3 options again?
Oh my gosh.
So investments,
No. The
Oh,
kill,
so-
marry.
Oh yeah.
Marry?
And F.
Oh,
which
F.
is like, yeah.
And just
So what's the
short and
difference between-
sweet.
What's the difference between kill and marry?
F.
Kill and F.
Oh, because if
F,
you're
you're
playing
keeping
with
around,
and
you're
like,
playing
yeah,
with.
short and
Oh,
sweet.
F.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You'll dip your toe in.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so. That's really hard. Oh, no, it's really hard.
we
It's
don't
really
want
hard.
a long story. We just want
I
you
know.
to tell us. And then Sam will give you her if she was a financial planner,
Okay.
what she would
So
choose.
investments and retirement really connected to each other. So
Yeah.
I can't you just have to marry wealth
One.
creation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because investing in retiring is
Okay, put budgeting as one of his options.
Okay,
because
budgeting.
retiring is like a
Okay,
state
wealth
of life. Yeah.
creation, insurance, or budgeting.
So wealth creation is the marry one.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Because of the experiences I've had with clients, insurance is the F one.
Okay.
It makes a massive difference to people's lives when they need it. And then budgeting is
You're
the
killing.
kill,
Yeah.
which is hard to
Oh my
say.
God. So that's why he doesn't mind drinking his bloody expensive coffees, because you're not the budgeter.
I actually am, but not in yeah.
Not
You-
in an almond latte sense.
Yeah, the almond
Strong.
latte.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strong. Sorry, strong.
Strong. That extra
Strong.
50 cents really like getting on the
oh.
Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway,
Yeah.
thanks for coming, Jason.
Thanks,
Loved
Jason.
having you.
Good to see you guys. Thank you.